Und jetzt kommen wir zum ersten Panel unserer Konferenz. Das Hauptthema lautet Für die Macht der Maschine zur Ohnmacht der Menschen. Ein spannendes Thema.
Genau, bevor wir loslegen, habe ich aber eine Frage für unser Publikum. Und zwar, wer hat heute alles ein Smartphone dabei? Hände hoch. Wer hat alle ein Smartphone? Ja? Gut, jetzt kommt die interessantere Frage. Wer hat keines dabei? Ja, sie trauen sich fast nicht. Ich sehe eine Dame, ich respektiere ihren Mut, dass sie das Haus verlassen ohne ein Handy. Vielleicht ist sie auch obdachlos, um das anzusprechen, was unser Bundespräsident gesagt hat, betreffend den Smartphones, die unser Haus darstellen. Jetzt können Sie alle Ihr Haus in die Hände nehmen, weil Sie werden sich jetzt einloggen, am liebsten auf slido.com. Das wäre super, wenn Sie das machen könnten. Sie können danach den Hashtag DS19 eingeben und damit sich einloggen und folgende Frage beantworten, die dann zum Panel auch passt. Sie lautet, führt die Macht der Maschinen zur Ohnmacht der Menschen? Was denken Sie, ja oder nein? Geben Sie doch Ihre Antwort jetzt auf Ihrem Handy ein und dann sehen wir hier direkt, 32 Leute sind super schnell gewesen und die meisten sagen nein. Okay, das wird spannend. Liebe Jada, ich hoffe, dass du das dann aufnehmen kannst und beim Panel mit unseren Gästen diskutieren wirst.
Und wir sehen uns gleich.
Bis gleich.
Vielen Dank, Tamara.
Dankeschön.
Es ist mir eine Ehre, unsere Gäste vorzustellen. Mrs. Mitchell Baker. She co-founded the Mozilla project to support the open, innovative web and ensure it continues offering opportunities for everyone. As chairwoman of Mozilla, Mitchell Baker is responsible for organizing and motivating employees and volunteers who are building the internet as a global public resource, open and accessible to all. That's very important. Please welcome Mrs. Mitchell Baker. And our next guest, Martina Irayama, since 2019, Switzerland State Secretary of Education, Research and Innovation, Vice President of the Board InnoSwiss, Switzerland's Innovation Promotion Agency, Member, Swiss National Science Foundation's Foundation Council. Herzlich willkommen. And Martin Vetterli, President of École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, Professor of Engineering at the École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, and former President of the National Research Council of the Swiss National Science Foundation. Herzlich willkommen. Sehr geehrte Gäste, referring to Professor Floridi's speech, I'd like to hear your thoughts, your feelings about the following question. In many ways, digitization has destroyed certainties and left us with a world of uncertainty and insecurity. Many people are beginning to have doubts. Do we still master technology progress? What are your thoughts, Mrs. Baker?
Well, I think we're in the very early phases. So I think we will master technology, but I think the timing is really unclear. I also think that history, you talked about Plato, but I might start with something closer. The Industrial Revolution gives us some background on what things look like. You know, technology will change society. Even after the marriage, like what we look like and even our perceptions probably of time or space or communities, they're going to be different. Our perceptions today aren't the same as the 1800s or pre-Enlightenment. So I do think that these spate of technologies will change what all those people in cities, their core perception of the world, not what we are as humans, but how in the environment we react, how we think about things, and how we view our place. And so those concepts I think we don't know. And we will change at least as much as humanity's perceptions have changed in the last couple hundred years. So I think that's almost a given. And the question is, how soon can we make that marriage? How soon and how much can ethics and governance be built into the digital challenges today? That, I think, is a question partly of ethics and governance, but partly as consumers and citizens. Right now we're starting to question technology or its impact, but in a way we're still giddy and we're still addicted. And so the idea of if something X were to go away, however worried we are, we'd probably be like shocked and it'd probably be difficult for governance to take away the capabilities of society today. And so I think it probably takes some generation at least to really understand what technology is. And I think there are questions, does the current generation get trapped? Especially with data and data mining. Like eventually we'll have to have a system where just because something exists, we don't trust it. I mean, video's not, I mean, you can make anything in a digital setting. So yes, we have some history of what you did when you were 18 and it was lousy. What does it mean for your job and your life? Like those systems we don't have yet. In 100 years we probably will, but how does the generation in the middle, or the generations in the middle of that process will be kind of living with some of the negative consequences and trying to build ethics and systems and governments and law and products and cultural values about how we deal with those things.
What is your opinion, Mr. Fetterly?
Well, I mean, since the invention or discovery of fire to the invention of Bitcoin, technology has always had these two faces, right? It has been used for good by humanity or it has been used for bad. And so it's a responsibility of society to decide what to do with technology. As scientists and engineers and technologists, we can lay out the possibilities, but it's for society, for civil society, please note the difference, for civil society to establish the governance for these new technologies. What I'm very astonished about, I'm sorry to have to say, is how far private enterprises have taken over the space of this digital space, sort of with very few boundaries on ethical issues, on morality, on, are we doing this for the good of humanity or for shareholder values? And we have been so far that it's just flabbergasting what I see every day showing up in terms of, breach of privacy, misuse of data, and so on, to the point that the foundations of modern society, that is democracy, has been put in danger. And I think it's high time that politics and the civil society takes back this space.
Mrs. Hirayama, do you agree with what we've heard so far?
I think it's always difficult to predict where new technology takes us. And it's worth remembering a huge mistake by Thomas G. Watson, former head of IBM, who predicted in 1943 that there might be a need for 5 computers worldwide. So even he made a completely wrong prediction. IBM became a very successful computer company. So this means it's important to be open, to be flexible, to have the best skilled people, not only to follow technology, but to drive technology and to use it. Coming back to uncertainty, also this is not new. Looking at the last industrial revolutions, society also had to deal with a lot of uncertainty. So beginning of the 20th century, 40% of the employment was in agriculture. Today it's 3%. So it's not that this 37% is unemployed nowadays, but we have different jobs and different demands, and this is where education plays an important role. So our compulsory education, professional education, and university education, they are very busy, not only right now, but also right now with identifying the needs of the future, the skills which are necessary, and I'm quite positive that our young generation will have a very good education also for the future, to be fit and to drive the digital transformation. But we also have the older generation, 40 plus, and here in Switzerland we are European champions in continuing education. So about 70% of the persons between 25 and 65 participate in a continuing education each year. That's really a lot, and this is important, but these are mainly people who already have a good education, and the ones who don't, they usually do not participate strongly in this kind of things. So we really have to work on this. And I think it's a key factor to enable the society to understand what's going on, to deal with the uncertainties.
Professor Floridi, I'd like to address a question to you. We are trying to teach machine ethical behavior. Do human beings always act ethically, or is there an ethical answer in every possible situation? In other words, can ethics be universal?
Yeah. Well, it would be nice if we could teach machines to be ethical. We have failed so far to teach humans to be ethical, so I have very little hopes for machines. But there's normally an important serious point to be made there. Sometimes people, you see a confusion between what is an ethical principle in say, product design. Sometimes what we're really talking about is safety. Now, safety can be ethical, can save lives. So the design of a microwave is universal, everywhere, from Tokyo to Los Angeles. If you open the microwave, I tried that so many times, it always stops working, which is great, because you can't burn your hand in it. Now, that design is a safety design. Is it ethical? Well, I mean, yes, it's a good thing, it should happen, but it's the minimal bare design requirement, something that should never happen. The microwave will always stop. Now, is that what we're talking about? Well, we can do a lot of good design, of minimal requirement, so that these machines, whatever they are, AI or not, they don't pass that particular boundary. But that, once again, is the minimal requirement. Can they discriminate between a kid playing with a plastic gun, in, say, somewhere, say, in a difficult context, shall we say, maybe Northern Ireland, given the topics today, and or a real gun? I wouldn't trust a machine ever, but I wouldn't trust a human either. I would trust much more a human with a machine. The best chess player is a grandmaster with a computer. That's the best chess player ever. That's unbeatable. So the combination of the two, I think we can teach machine and humans to work together to improve the ethical standards, definitely. But I'm afraid we're not going to close hell.
Mrs. Baker, does technology jeopardize democracy? How we can we counter this tendency?
Well, at the current moment, you can see, I mean, I think the answer, yes, right. It's very clear now that with social media, it's easy to target and identify individuals, and the data collection is enough that manipulation, you can go beyond prediction to manipulation. So at the current moment, like that's a significant issue. And we don't know the time frame of where that will roll out in different electoral politics, but that's clearly one. And, but in the bigger question of, is that inevitable or can we do something about it, I would say it's definitely not inevitable. I mean, it's 2 or 3 years old in clear understanding. In fact, I haven't seen deep analysis of the Brexit votes. I've seen mostly deep analysis of the 2016 US election, plus the Hungarian. So we're just very early in understanding what's happening. And so the chances to make change are really possible. And I think, I'm not sure that it's ethics, but I also think that social convention and understanding also has to grow. I mean, most of us are using recommendation engines. If you're in a social media context and you're following, certainly if it's a YouTube kind of video piece, you're clearly being directed every day, right? We just don't really understand that it's happening and what it means now. And so that needs to happen. And then I would also go back and point out, the Industrial Revolution was a deeply capital-intensive and centralizing period in many ways. And after you got through child labor, and a range of issues, the democracy did expand in that period. So if you look back to what democracy was in the 1800s, it's a very, very small group of wealthy landowning men. So even in the midst of technical challenges and the complex environments of the growth of cities, we've seen the rise of democracy as well. But we will not have exactly the same democracy as 1950 or 1900 or pre-World War I, whatever that meant. It will look and feel different. So society will change. Exactly what that means and how it works, I think, will be different. But if you take the value of, is the citizenry the source of power in government? And can a citizen express discomfort, dislike, a desire to change government? And is there some connection between that and power, or you raise your voice? If you take that broader view of democracy, then I think the possibilities are really quite large. But we are in a moment of trauma and crisis now.
Mr. Vetterli, governments all over the world are trying to outplay each other with strategies to foster artificial intelligence. How dangerous is it for Switzerland to stand aside and not to enter this game?
I must say I don't understand the question, because I don't think Switzerland is a side of this game. If I look at the research level in Switzerland in the field of AI, of machine learning, data science, and so on, I think we are very well positioned for a small country, thanks to the support of the Swiss Confederation, the taxpayer in Switzerland, which pays for a fantastic public research and education system. I would like to publicly acknowledge this, because it's not the case in many other countries, okay? Public support for free education, okay? You know, Mitchell, what I'm talking about, right? We're both in Berkeley, and the US has a little bit of challenge there. So the research level is very good. It's actually documented quantitatively in these rankings and so on. But it's true, we have to keep doing it, and we have to keep looking for the right applications of these fields, and also help other science fields and society at large to use actually state-of-the-art data science, AI, and so on, to solve what are the problems of the day. And I really liked what Professor Floridi said. Probably the biggest challenge for society is not so much AI, not AI, it's about global warming and how to use the know-how we can generate, the data that we have access to actually address exactly the most pressing problem for civilization in the 21st century.
Mrs. Rayama, your state secretariat is preparing a report on artificial intelligence, and I imagine that legal issues figure in it as well. Do we need more regulation with regard to digital transformation, or is self-regulation the better way?
It's important to find a good balance between regulation and self-regulation. Like our president said before, there is a need for regulation, but we have to be careful not to regulate too much. So we should only regulate when it's really necessary. We should find a technology-neutral way for regulation, that we are open for innovation, for new technologies, and this is for sure not an easy question to find a good way to do this. Preparing this report for artificial intelligence, it's not all about regulation, but it's also about the topic what's going on in Switzerland, what's going on in administration, and where could the administration use artificial intelligence. So we want to go a step ahead in this direction. It's very important to have the exchange with all the different federal offices, because we also heard before everybody is working on his own, so we have a lot of potential to work together and to go ahead together in the administration, and yes, also to be a good example for the private companies, and so I'm quite optimistic that we will be able to publish the report by the end of the year.
So where do we need to take action? What is more urgent? It's a question to both of you, also to Mr. Vetterli.
You mean in the artificial intelligence? Yeah. I think what is really important is that we have an environment which is open, which allows innovation, which respects the autonomy of the institutions, the universities, the funding institutions, and we need to support the transfer of knowledge between universities and companies, not only to have good research, but also to use the results which are produced. And I think this is very important. And of course we need to have regulation, but it's not all about regulation. And I want to state our president again, we also have to be willing to take some risk, not to be crazy, but to take some risk. We cannot regulate everything to the end, then we will kill all innovation.
So, as running one of the 2 institutes of technology in Switzerland, we have to be sure that we are able to attract the best talent to Switzerland, be it professors or students, because to be competitive in research, especially in a field that is so competitive like AI and data science, we have to be very, very attractive. So that's number 1. That means, of course, we have to have enough funding for doing that research, but it also means we have to be open, for example, with respect to the European research programs, where we compete for the moment very, very well. It also means we have to collaborate across Switzerland so that the resources we have, it's a small country, we have to make sure the networks in Switzerland work very well, that we don't reinvent the wheel or compete against each other. I'll give just one example. The 2 ETHs together have started the Swiss Data Science Center very successfully, which is a disposal of the entire research community and actually also industry to help people with data to actually achieve knowledge extraction using, for example, AI. And with all this together, at the end it comes out of this very, very good working conditions in Switzerland that make the country very attractive and keep a leadership position.
Mrs. Rayama, what determines with technology prevail in Switzerland? Is the market? What is the role of the public authorities?
So, as I mentioned before, it's very important that our research system can work in a creative, open, internationally connected way. And so, of course, the market is very important because at the end, new technologies have to be used and have to be accepted by the market. But in the beginning, new technologies are developed and maybe in the first steps it's even not clear what they can be used for. So we really need the research activities, the basic research at the universities and the knowledge and technology transfer to the companies. And here we have in Switzerland a good system with the universities of applied sciences, 2 funding institutions with the Swiss National Science Foundation and InnoSwiss, so that we can really support basic research to application with all the technology transfer which is necessary. But in the end, of course, the market is very important.
Mitchell Baker, is it inevitable that citizens have to forego privacy in order to make the most of digitization?
As asked, I'd say no. But I would say we are coming into an era where sensors are cheap. And so the amount of data about the environment and about us that will be available and transmitted is going up. Right now what we're focused on is, in large part, what our phones are sending about us, how our experience, particularly on social networks, but really any app you're using on your phone, usually it's a data gathering mechanism, which then gets sold. So we have that piece, and I think, no, that's where we've ended up. There's a separate piece, which is just the ability to capture and transmit data is going way up. Right? Every chair, every shoe, you name it, within, I don't know, Moore's Law, I can't even tell you how quick a time it will be. The ability to gather easy information. Why is your shoe not gathering information about your posture? If you've had surgery, so it's a small example, but these kinds of information flows are going to go crazy. And so what we do with them and how we regulate them, where they go, these are going to become bigger questions. Like, in a sense, the social media is the first of many examples that we'll see. So trying to get it a better balance in today's privacy issues is really important, just for today, but also because more is coming. And so I don't think it's inevitable. We have a certain business model, which is, we have 2 things now that there's this sense and desire and even pressure to have your personal brand. Who's paying attention to you? Who's following you? Like, how do you communicate with people? And all of that material is now sold and monetized. So like the whole of human experience is the business model right now. And so that's a piece that we should experiment with whether that's the right one and whether we should break it. And so that's why I say some of those may be regulatory and others of those are our own experience as human beings and citizens. Is that over time, is that sense of personal place in the world and that it has to be public really the right way for all of us to be living?
Well, I completely agree, and I think that somewhat we missed the boat of establishing a better digital environment. Going back to what you were saying, roughly in the 90s, we misunderstood all this technology for another stage in communication technology. We did not realize that we were building a new environment. We thought it was TV, radio, newspapers, alphabet, Gutenberg, plus. And all of a sudden, we thought, okay, well, let's this market develop. This was in the 90s, Clinton administration and so on, and then we will regulate, as we did in the past. I mean, it was easy to see things that way at the time. Some people, a few of us, academics and so on, we saw this differently. Now that we have realized finally that this is not a communication-only device, it's something that you live in. So I don't live on TV, but I live on life. I live on the web. I spend hours in that particular environment. Whoever builds the environment owns the space. And now that space is owned by private companies. So that mistake has been made. How much we can reverse that mistake, it's open to debate. Certainly, in my view, regulation is essential. Now that we have all this data floating all over the place, being collected at every corner, any time, by everybody, not just companies, but also governments, including in my own country, back in the UK, more CCTV cameras than you can possibly imagine per person. Surely, what you want to make sure is, what are you going to do with the data? Because maybe we can stop the flow of the data going, maybe not, I don't know. But surely we can do a lot about what happens to the data once they are collected. And that's why we are in a good position around this corner of the world, in Europe, and with the GDPR and everything else. Now that is good news, implementable, perfectable, everything can be done once more better, but definitely the right direction, because you want to make sure that, okay, maybe you collect the data, maybe I cannot stop you from not knowing how many t-shirts I bought and where I had my dinner, but I'd like to know whom you're giving to, what you're going to do with that. Are you manipulating me through those data? Am I being incriminated, misjudged with this data? That is essential and is in our power. So that train has not been missed. And that's where I would like to stress what the things that have already been said before. Regulation, self-regulation, we don't have to choose. We can use both. So we can say self-regulate, and insofar as you don't, we will regulate you. That seems to me the future. We can do this because that's the power of politics over business.
Yeah, let me just elaborate on that one. You mentioned GDPR. It's amazing that Europe actually took the lead on GDPR, and finally other countries will follow. This, I think, is extremely important. It shows that actually data being produced in a country like Switzerland is actually owned by Swiss citizens. It's not owned by, some random private company. And so to think about issues like privacy, about who owns the data, who can market the data and so on, these are the fundamental questions. We need to have a digital market that functions, but where citizens, users are not simply the product, which is what happens now. I'm an optimist, okay, so I think it's not too late, but we have to be extremely careful to make the right decisions now for Switzerland, for Europe, ultimately for the world.
May I add something? So the conventional wisdom in the tech industry for, 10, 20 years has been that people talk about privacy but don't care. And that you can build a privacy product, but it won't succeed. And that's not just Silicon Valley, that was throughout Europe, including Germany, where at least the public expressions of privacy are high. And I believe that is starting to change. At least we're starting at Mozilla to see signals in the market that consumers actually pay attention and, given a choice and an understanding, will make different decisions. This is new. And the connection to the GDPR is that it both sends a signal about governance and law and required compliance, but it is another signal from society that the values of privacy or personal security are becoming market forces. And that would be a phenomenal change. So this is partly a plea. You know, at Mozilla we try to make product, but a plea that if you see or experience or find products that have privacy characteristics, even if they're narrow, like as consumers adopt those, it sends a signal to the market that this is actually a time when security and privacy features that are real in products will be accepted. And I think that's a key piece of the cycle, because we need these products, even if they're niche products, to start to demonstrate what's possible. So I'll give one example, only one, because I don't want to be a commercial. But we have a feature for Firefox users that restricts the ability of Facebook to track you as you travel around the web. So it's not an alternative to Facebook in any way, but it limits the data that Facebook collects. So the signal of the number of people who use that is important to us. It's an extension currently, so it's the fastest growing extension we've ever had. So now we start to get data points for the design of products that say something that's focused on privacy and security will actually be adopted in society. And those are investment signals into the market and into, new companies. So I want to encourage you, sometimes they feel small or, not worth the time, but those market signals are really key. And that's how we get the examples of what's possible and how you could regulate well. And it's very hard to regulate when there's nothing out there that points the way for you. But as we get these products, even if they're not used by hundreds of millions of people, if they're used by tens or 100 million people and they work well, that is a real helpful element in how to regulate something effectively.
Thank you very much. Please.
We very often talk about technology, but the aspects of how to use that data, that's not about technology. So humanities play an important role in this discussion we really have to have in our society. And also we have to consider the different culture. So it's important that we have a discussion in Switzerland, but that we also have a discussion in the international context with the international organizations, and we have to find ways, how to use this value, but also we have to find the limits, and probably the definition for this will not be the same in all countries of the world.
We still have a few minutes left. I'm wondering if the young people have a question. Tama, do have our young audience also a question to address to our guests? Of course.
My microphone, thank you very much. Yes, of course, we do have a question, but before I get to the question, I would like to get back to our survey we had at the beginning before you started the discussion. I asked the people whether they believe that the power of machines will make us humans feel less powerful. And the answer was 70% said no, only 29% of the audience thinks yes, it could indeed feel us powerless. And the question is also connected to the one our youth has, which will also be discussed in their presentation later on. The question is, how do we make sure that we keep the control over the algorithms before they take over control over us? Who would like to answer?
Mr. Fethi would like to start.
Well, make sure that you can always pull the plug. So more seriously, I mean, and Professor Floridi said it very well. It is for society to decide which algorithms are actually running. Right now, we're just in sort of a blind mode where we are sort of, society at large is not aware of what is really happening. This is sort of a no man's land where companies have made huge progress, very interesting technology, without really society understanding that the rug was being pulled under their feet. Data is a new oil, but who owns the oil? It's not us who provides the data. What we do with it, done by algorithms, is interesting, but we should be in the driver's seat of what we really want. I think it's a question of, I call this digital maturity, which means that the society has to understand what is happening. This happened with the first industrial revolution, it's happening now. This is also related to education, so that the population at large understand what is going on and then takes the right decisions.
Thank you very much indeed. I think you need to go to Geneva, Mr. Fetteri, Mrs. Baker. Thank you very much indeed for this conversation, and thank you to Tama for this question and the young audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.